Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for having me, Eric. Thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it. I work with Eric at the Nature Conservancy. I work out of our North American region and kind of our global office. And part of what I do at the Conservancy is, work across our business units, particularly across the U.S. and Canada, to help folks as they're starting to think about forest management or forest operations, particularly commercial forest management, commercial forest operations, and then forest certification, where that might play a role. So in our case at the Conservancy, forest certification, we work closely with an organization called the Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC. And I'm sure some of y'all are familiar with FSC, but for those of you that are not, it's a global organization, over 80 countries around the world. And then here in the US and Canada in particular, here in the US, about 38 million acres, something like that certified. I think it's around 150, 160 between the US and Canada. So pretty good footprint. But FSC, or Forest Stewardship Council, is kind of this membership-based organization. It's chamber-based, and it's really focused on kind of the environmental aspects, the economic aspects, and the social aspects of forest management, particularly commercial forest management and forest products. And as I said, it's a membership-based organization where members are kind of sorted into chambers so they can caucus with folks with similar interests. And then each of the chambers have equal voting rights and equal rights within government, governance and other things. So the Nature Conservancy, as a member of the Environmental Chamber, I serve on the board of FSCUS. It's kind of how we support the organization via the Conservancy and FSCUS. FSC in general are kind of getting to the nuts and bolts of it. Of course, this is decided to be a market-based incentive. So the idea is that when a forest product makes it to the consumer, if it's been certified through the chain, I'll show you this in a second, then it can carry a label on it. And the idea is that the consumers or informed consumers can see that label and know that that product or that forest product comes from responsibly or well-managed forest. So to determine kind of what is well-managed forest, there's a set of standards, both chain of custody and forest management standards that we as landowners are audited against if we're certified. And that's kind of consumed, basically 10 principles to say, like, these are what we all agree more or less are the high-level principles of a well-managed forest. And then underneath those, there's a set of criteria. And then to determine if we're meeting those criteria, we have indicators. And the indicators are what we're really audited against. And we're audited annually across our units. And so we hire folks to come out, go through all of our operations, look at our forest practices, determine if they meet the standards. They'll give us non-conformances if we don't, and if we do, then we check us off and everything's good to go. But in order to kind of meet that check, we operate, and most of us are kind of at the top of this graphic here, is the forest managers and those managing the lands. But beyond that, there's a chain of folks when those products come off between harvesters, primary producers, secondary producers, and everything else. So in order for that to get the consumer and be labeled, then it has to be certified all through there. So there's a few different labels. If you look on your forest products, you may see some of these, the FSC mix label in particular, on pulp and packaging products, those things where there's blended materials, FSC 100% in particular on whole wood. And then, recycled materials can carry a label as well. The idea between all of this is that it's a means to kind of highlight and recognize the values that we all share within the forest that go beyond just the forest products or the market values themselves. So kind of thinking about, providing a sustained yield of forest products, helping provide social license to folks who are operating in different ways, to continue to facilitate, provide market access, to think about the people that are doing the work and the communities that are around these land bases and other places that may be impacted. And then, of course, to think about some of the environmental aspects and ecological aspects that go along with this management as well. We are often in the business of a disturbance, right? And so there's impacts for those disturbances. And these standards and FSC standards are ways to kind of help us think through that in a systematic and formulatic way. Obviously, there's some additional, as a sustainability standard and an environmental standard, there's a handful of things that come along with that that are kind of unique often to certification and FSC management. So that's in particular thinking about designating your high conservation value areas, thinking about rare ecosystems or threatened ecosystems. You guys are all experts in this. We've heard a lot about longleaf already. RT&E species, thinking about cultural and historic sites and how you operate around those or work with those, or thinking about how you may work with the people that have historic connections to the property and other things. All of these are things that kind of show up in these standards and that prompt us as forest managers to consider, to take into account, to plan for, and other things. And this is what people, as the consumers, are thinking about when they're making these purchases. So from a fire perspective, to get specific to what we're doing here, there's not a lot of restrictions. There's only a few places, like within the current FSC standard, that fire in particular is called out. All of the qualifications and certifications and everything that you all are thinking about go well beyond this in most every case. But kind of where it is important to think about and where it does play within the standard are as we think about kind of the economics and the environmental and the social aspects of it, thinking about, the workers, thinking about the communities, all of that stuff gets folded in. And then thinking about, of course, the role of fire in the systems as well, too, just from a forest management's perspective. There's obviously challenges to this, and I'm sure everybody's heard them. The standards are complex, it's expensive. FSC in particular is being based out of Germany, is often considered very Eurocentric. And, many of these criticisms are very valid and true. And so we're frequently and often trying to think of different tools or ways that we can kind of take the edge off or get some of that friction out. These days, a lot of that are thinking about risk-based approaches, so kind of sampling and thinking about how we audit and concentrating the efforts of our audit and our time and money on the places that are riskiest, the places that are most likely to be a nonconformance, or the places that are most likely to result in a really negative outcome if there is a nonconformance there. Thinking about jurisdictional approaches, so on analysis like high conservation value area analysis or other things, looking at broad areas, and then for folks within those areas that want to be certified, they're able to tier up to those analyses. So that kind of takes the edge off. And then leveraging tools and technology. We've seen drones and stuff and their applications in fire. There's lots of applications around monitoring for that. There's tools, predictive tools, like we use the land fire program that I'm sure a lot of y'all are familiar with in a lot of our analysis and management. And so there's lots of these kind of tools and solutions that we start to build in to try to make it easier. And then one of the other big ones that we use at the Conservancy are FSC groups. And so we administer and manage a group certificate. That's part of my role. Right now, we've got about 700,000 acres in our group that goes from, basically the border of Canada and Maine to down here in Georgia. And so we've got lots of different landowners, some Conservancy properties, some partner properties. We've got a few universities in there, folks that can come in and we kind of help administer the group, administer the audits, help them, provide them with tools and templates and other things. And it's a means and kind of a mechanism to kind of help facilitate and make it a little easier for folks. There's a handful of things when you come into certification that you're expected to do that folks may not always be doing as a matter of common practice, even though I think generally a lot of times folks recognize that it would be good things to do. It's just the kind of stuff that doesn't always get done. And so this, we frequently hear that this kind of helps us true up and be sure folks are checking all of the boxes that we want to get checked. And then there's some annual requirements. So initially, when you get enrolled in a certificate or you become certified, there's going to be a chunk and a body of work. And then after that, there'll be some annual requirements. So mostly that's in terms of monitoring and reporting and audits and those sorts of things. And that's kind of providing that check so everybody can be confident in the assurance and be confident in the labels and the forest products and other things that they're purchasing. So my understanding is that we've got 2 more presentations and questions, so I'm gonna stop there. So, just quickly, just to sum up, a couple of pros. I think it really, we find that it elevates and improves practice, that it kind of mitigates some of the risk that goes along with some of the work, and that frequently can help facilitate market access, help get wood to mills when non-certified wood may not be able to get to the mills. But it does come with some additional administrative burden. It can be expensive depending on what level you get into it at. And they do get complex sometimes. So I'll hand over to whomever is next.